So the second speaker for this education and conservation part will be one of the City University of Hong Kong PhD students that built this conference. So Miss Shiyi FANG, that built a presentation with the topic of concept of conservation and more specifically a study case of Hong Kong with the different challenge that Hong Kong is facing in terms of conservation and how they try to manage in a broad approach. And this topic has been built as well by Khizar, HAYAT, Tania, PERROUX, and myself. So Shiyi, if you can share your screen and start your presentation. You are welcome.
Thank you, Nicolas.
Can you make it? I don't see.
Yeah. Is it?
Yes.
Is the screen sharing now? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so hi everyone. So recently I had a look at the latest WWF report about wildlife, and that's where we have the idea about for today's presentation, Hong Kong animal conservation, why, when, and how. So the report gives us some recent number on the conservation. Did you know we have over 50% loss in biodiversity? Over 37,000 of species on the earth were threatened with extinction. There are a lot of causes of biodiversity loss, such as changing and degradation in landfill or species overexploitation. But at this impressive rate, the loss of biodiversity can affect the balance of the natural ecosystems. Regarding these problems, it seems that one of the major issues we should do is to improve the conservation of wildlife through the world. But what is animal conservation and where this movement comes from? So in today's presentation, we mainly focus on the animal conservation in Hong Kong from three different aspects: why, when, and how. But now let's just time back to the Ice Age when humans first domesticated animals in centralized area, and it is the start point of the human society has impact on biodiversity. And when time comes to human has Asian civilizations, in many Asian cultures, they worship animal as gods. Even today, a lot of cultures still remain the symbol of zodiac like this. And with the development of the civilization, city areas gradually has clear boundary from the nature. But at 19th century, some people start to realize the value of the wilderness, and some activities to start some wilderness society. And by the early 20th century, some animal protect issue are intertwined with concept about ecology, environment, and conservation. Save the whales become a popular slogan. History of animal-human interaction. Conservation is a very new topic. The definition of the animal conservation is the practice of protecting wild species and their habitats to maintain healthy wildlife species or populations and to restore, protect, or enhance natural ecosystems. Basically, animal conservation is to protect biodiversity from the threats by us humans. Even though we don't intend to, there are a lot of implied mechanisms for animal conservation, like classify animals species with 9 categories from not evaluated to extinct, and protect the most endangered species based on the scientific collection of data. And organizations such as International Union of Conservation of Nature, in short, we usually call it IUCN, provide such information. And the process to protect endangered species in its natural habitat is commonly known as in situ conservation, while ex situ conservation is to relocate the endangered species from their natural habitat to some protected areas equipped specifically for the species protection and preservation. And we all need to contribute into animal conservation. That's why the animal conservation is facing some human bias. It's cute because it is famous because of its cute appearance. But did you know panda is a kind of umbrella species? So the core idea of the umbrella species is and get funding to protect the whole biotope. And the choice of umbrella species is led by human. Sometimes it's because the species live in the wild range, and sometimes just because the species has charisma. So and it may lead to unrealistic expectation from the public and donors. For example, they will feel their money misused if it goes to other animals rather than panda, even though they share the same environment. And also human intends to attribute their feelings and needs to animals, which is called anthropomorphism. So once the nature the way human wants it rather than the way the nature should be, such thoughts also brings some negative effect on the conservation work. After a brief introduction of conservation, now we use Hong Kong, a land of economy and nature, as a study case to discuss why Hong Kong needs animal conservation, when to imply animal conservation in Hong Kong, and how to. So as previous presenter, Ms. Cui mentioned, Hong Kong is incredible in biodiversity. So Hong Kong has in total 3,000 species on record, and including over 40 species of mammals, which most of them are bats. And by the way, from the previous presentation, I got a lot of fun facts of bats. And meanwhile, Hong Kong is lack of flat land for urban development. The built-up area takes up 24% of the development areas, and with very high population density of over 27,000 persons per kilo square. The remaining land of a compressed area of conservation needs and areas subject to topographical and other development issues. The projected growth of Hong Kong populations showed that Hong Kong has a continued demand of flat land for development. Meeting this demand while promoting or even preserving the animal conservation work in Hong Kong is a major challenge. While the development of Hong Kong urban space, the home range of the animal in the city is gradually compressed. More and more human-animal conflicts occurring in the city. From my personal experience living in Hong Kong, I have met more than one times wild animals such as wild boars or monkeys in the city areas. In Hong Kong, hiking as a usual leisure activities brings a lot of problems, like the litter brought by hiking not only just damage the wildness of Hong Kong, but also the litter containers become a feeding ground for the wildlife. And also, human feeding has led to an unnatural growth of wildlife in Hong Kong too. animals gradually lose their instinctive fear to human and stay near the urban area to approach human for food. In line with the global trend, Hong Kong has been warming up from the last century. So according to the record, the number of hot nights in Hong Kong is increasing while the cold days is decreasing. Apart from the temperature rising, Hong Kong now is experiencing more frequent heavy rain than before. And also the sea level in Victoria Harbour is increasing. And from climate change, habitats are beginning to shift, shrink, melt, and even disappear. The intense frequent heavy rains may destroy the nesting trees, drown animals, and spread invasive species and damage the ecosystems. More increasingly, animal life cycles are out of sync with plant growth and seasonal changes. And the invasive alien species is another problem Hong Kong is facing now for the animal conservation. It may cause quickly reproduction of native species, causing ecological, economic, and social damage. The invasive alien species may introduce into new ecosystems by transportation of goods or deliberate release, such as mercy release. In Hong Kong, many people believe release animals from captivity not just help them from the suffering, but also the releasing will bring the health, fortune, and the money to the people who release them. But Hong Kong might not be the original home for such species like African birds or South Asian turtles. The winter in Hong Kong is too cold for them. And for those who survived in Hong Kong after the releasing, they will compete with local species for resources. And even releasing native species to suitable habitats may upset the balance of original inhabitants. Animals may also carry disease and parasites. Release them risks spreading the disease and parasites to native animals or even humans. In response, Hong Kong began to take legal measures to solve animal conservation problems. As early as 1976, the Country Park Ordinance approved for animal conservation. It provides a legal framework to design, development, and management country parks and special areas in Hong Kong. Over the years, Hong Kong keep updating the ordinance and increasing the number of country parks and special areas to provide more and more wilderness habitat. Also, since 1976, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species has been approved in Hong Kong, and it was repealed by Protection of Endangered Species of Animal and Plant Ordinance in 2006. The ordinance required a license to be issued before people want to import or export animal products from and to Hong Kong. And in 2016, Hong Kong came up with its first biodiversity strategy and action plan. In this plan, Hong Kong came up with a systematical conservation plan for the next 5 years. And in 2018, a ban on the ivory trade was approved. Maximum penalty for wildlife crime in Hong Kong increased to 10 years. And in 2021, the ivory trade was totally banned in Hong Kong. At present, Hong Kong has created some opportunities for animal conservation. According to the Country Park Ordinance, Hong Kong now has 24 country parks and 15 special areas. It takes up 43% of total Hong Kong land, and 1.2 billion of Hong Kong dollar has been spent on animal conservation issue in the past few years. And also some ongoing projects in Hong Kong involved with animal conservation works through the habitat conservation, like sustainable villages or management initiative for private land, or fish pond construction. So because of the time limited, here I won't go through the detail of this project. Plans and ordinates inform the real actions. The animal conservation actions taken in Hong Kong including many aspects, like improving the knowledge. Knowledge is really critical for good decision making. It ensures the right decision was made in right times. Although we already know Hong Kong is incredible in biodiversity, there is still a large group of species remains to be learned in Hong Kong. So in Hong Kong, we keep finding new species, not just 1 or 2 per year, but on average, every 33 days, we find 1 new species. And since 2010, there are no less than 125 new species has been described in Hong Kong. Hong Kong has been started biodiversity survey to collect the basic information about species. This kind of knowledge will provide evidence for further decision making. Knowledge takes into actions. Survey data inform threat assessment. Hong Kong has used the biodiversity data to identify 5 priority species, including Chinese penguin and freshwater turtles. According to the government report, Hong Kong has updated the specific action plan for Chinese penguin. The report states Chinese penguin as native mammals species of Hong Kong, but it experienced population decline to the extinction just because the need of wildlife, sushi, and traditional medicine. The report analyzes the threats Chinese penguin is facing and came up with its specific action plan, including research and monitoring, species protection, habitat protection, capacity building, and community involvement. Successful conservation actions depends not only on the government, but also on the support of the community. Connecting people with nature and encourage their involvement in conservation and sustainably using biodiversity are very important too. After all, conservation is to protect the biodiversity from the negative effect of us humans. Other than Hong Kong government, sectoral partners and NGOs also deliver direct participation in the work to promote conservation awareness. For example, to solve the problem of increasing human-animal conflict, Hong Kong government removed the litter containers in the country parks completely and start Take Your Litter Home program. Meanwhile, Ocean Park Conservation Foundation organized an educational program about Don't Feed Wild Animals, aiming to preserve the natural habitat for animals by educating public not to feed them in the wild. In Hong Kong, there are a lot of NGOs, charity organizations like Our Hong Kong or Kandori FANG to provide environmental education, reconnect the public with the nature. Hong Kong as a case study in animal conservation, facing many challenges, like balancing urban development and the nature conservation is a huge challenge for Hong Kong. Although Hong Kong has taken many relevant measurements, it seems that when people talk about nature conservation, they always put the economy on the opposition position. As if these two cannot coexist, it makes we wonder, is the economy and nature really a dilemma? And how could economy and nature benefit each other? We believe only by making Hong Kong nature and economy sustain with each other, we can build long-term conservation. As for the future of Hong Kong, we hope the nature landscape of Hong Kong will become an icon as its beautiful skyline. And it will be a comfortable and friendly home for other species which also lives here.
Thank you, Shiyi, for your presentation.
Yeah, thank you for listening, and also this presentation combined the work of my group mates, Khizar, Tania, and Nicolas. And if you have any further questions and want to discuss with us, feel free to contact us through the email. Thank you.
Thank you, Shiyi. So yeah, we have a couple of questions. We will be maybe brief to let Robert talk after that. So what's the difference between animal conservation and animal welfare?
Okay, yeah. So for the animal conservation and the animal welfare, the easiest way to distinguish these two is we concern animal conservation more on the whole species, but the animal welfare concerned about the individual animals. I can give some examples like modern Zoom is a dilemma situation of animal conservation and animal welfare. Like Zoom now undertakes a lot of functions, not just entertainment, but it also educates publics and also provides research facilities for animal conservation. And it all has positive effect on the animal conservation. But some people also think that keep the animal in the captivity of Zoom also have negative effect on its own welfare. But also sometimes animal conservation and animal welfare benefits each other. Like in most of the case, like the ivory trade, from the concern of animal conservations, catching elephants for its ivory may risk the whole species extinction. But and meanwhile, cut off elephant's ivory while it's still alive may cause unnecessary suffering of the individual elephant. So in this case, animal conservation and animal welfare benefit with each other. And that's why Hong Kong has been banned the ivory trade completely since 2021. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then a second one. Can you give a good example where urban growth and nature have found a good balance in a metropolitan city?
Yeah, so we don't say that Hong Kong is not a good example of urban balance of urban development and nature, because you can tell from my previous presentation. So Hong Kong use 24% of the land for urban development, but 43% of the land are used for conservation and biodiversity conservation. And Hong Kong actually is an example of balance, and we just hope Hong Kong can do better in the future.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
So now we can switch to the next speaker. So